Hello, Social Work Practice 1 class. I just want to say that I miss you all. I wish that we were still meeting face to face, but unfortunately we're not able to do that right now. And until we're able to do that again, which I guess is going to be in the fall, we're going to go to video format. I hope you all, I'm going to do my best to deliver just as much material as I would as if we were meeting face to face. I'm going to apologize right now that I have two dogs here and one of them likes to bark. But anyway, we're still going to go ahead and get started. We're going to start in Chapter 11 of the Social Work Skills Workbook. That's the Barry Cornier book. That's the softback book. And Chapter 11 is contracting. So we're just going to keep going forward in that plain change process of the generalist intervention model. And we're going to start our learning objectives or to discuss the purposes and functions of contracting. We're going to establish goals. We're going to develop action plans, identify action steps. We're going to plan for evaluation, and we're going to summarize the contract. The contracting process begins during the exploring phase and continues throughout the assessment process. It is the necessary next step that following exploration and assessment, and it leads to the development of a service agreement or contract between the client and the social worker. The ISP is what I call them where I work, the individual service plan. During this process, we're going to be establishing goals with our clients. We'll work together to identify focal issues, which are the priority issues. We're going to develop goals to resolve those identified issues. We're going to, after we identify the issues with the client and discuss how and why they occur, together we're going to generate ideas about how best to resolve these issues. Now we're going to encourage our clients to participate in establishing goals for our work together. The goals are our aims towards which we, as a social worker and the client, direct our cognitive, emotional, behavioral, and situational actions. We have to set effective goals, and that's a critical element in the change process. To do this, we often adopt a SMART format when constructing goals, which means they're specific, they're measurable, they're action-oriented, they're realistic, and they're timely. We'll talk about that more. Egan's criteria for effective goals. Effective goals are stated as accomplishments rather than a process. The goal to lose weight is a process. To achieve a weight of 125 pounds and maintain that weight for 6 months is an accomplishment. So we want to state our goals as accomplishments. A process, they're too broad. So we want to state them in clear and specific terms. Without clear goals, we are likely to end up somewhere other than where we intended. Securing employment is not specific, but securing employment as a waitress in a restaurant in 6 weeks is much more clear and specific. We want to make sure that our effective goals are stated in measurable or verifiable terms. To feel better is hard to recognize and still is not verifiable. To feel better is indicated by sleeping the night through with at least 7 hours per night on at least 5 nights a week, completely eating 3 meals daily, and scoring at least 15% better on a depression rating scale is much more measurable. For effective goals, the Egan's criteria, they have to be realistic and time specific. So given the client's motivation, their opportunities, the strengths, the resources, and the capacities of that person, issue, situation system, the established goals reflect a reasonably high probability. So we want to make sure that they kind of match with the client's, with these things we listed, the motivation, opportunities, strengths, and resources. So if the goal doesn't match, then there's a mismatch. An example would be setting a goal to get all A's in the fall semester when the student has never scored a grade better than a C. Pass all courses and get a B grade or better in at least one course is more reasonable. Egan's criteria for effective goals also means that they've got to be adequate. If achieved, that it would improve the situation of the client. A goal is adequate to the degree that its accomplishment would represent progress towards a resolution of an agreed upon problem or issue. Goals that do not contribute are therefore inadequate. We want to make sure that for a goal to be effective, that it's congruent with the client's value and cultural systems. Unless there is a life-threatening situation, we should never ask a client to forsake their personal cultural values. Never, never, never. Okay, effective goals are also time specific. It should include a time for achievement. When is the achievement of the goal expected? Is it 2 weeks, 2 months? We have to set a time date, time limit. guidelines for establishing goals. We've got to consider the client's ability and a willingness to work towards goals. Some clients are in such a state of uncertainty and confusion that pushing too hard towards goal specificity would exacerbate or worsen their situation of distress, their state of distress. So we want to make sure that we don't push our clients too hard. We want to postpone goal specification if clients have yet to come to terms with the issues identified. We want to wait until the confusion and the ambiguity subside, then return to the encourage identification of the clear and precise goals that conform closely with that SMART format, where they're specific, they're measurable, they're attainable. They're action-oriented, realistic, and timely. We want to engage in stage matching because, like I mentioned before, when there's a mismatch, then between the client's goals and their stage of change, then we're not going to achieve as much progress as we would like. We go back to that trans-theoretical model, the stages of change, the pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. Remember all that we talked about earlier? We've got to think about stage matching. I mentioned that. We want to establish goals and action plans and determine action steps in correspondence to the client's level of motivation and readiness. Example would be if we were working with someone that was in the pre-contemplation stage where they tend to deny or minimize the issues that others notice, such as a drinking problem. So to suggest to that person who really is in the pre-contemplation stage, so they really don't accept that they have a problem or acknowledge it, so to suggest that they have a drinking problem, that they need to abstain from drinking for 4 weeks and maintain that abstinence for 4 months. Thereafter would be such an extreme mismatch that the client would likely not return to see us again. We're going to talk about goal identification now. We define goals through a collaborative process with our clients and gain full informed consent to work with toward their achievement. When we work with our client to establish their goals, we implicitly agree to contract in which both parties commit to work toward their accomplishment. Sorry, a little dry mouth. We want to encourage clients to create a goal for each focal issue. So each issue that they mention, we want a goal for each one of those. If the client is too focused on an issue to respond with a goal for a problem, we want to ask questions such as, how will you know when a particular problem is no longer a problem? Or what will indicate to you that this problem is a thing of the past? Asking these types of questions also gives the client optimism because it asks them to imagine life without that problem. The goals often bear a close relationship to the identified needs, problems, or concerns of issues of concern. There are examples on table 11.1 on page 418 in our skills text. Some of those that they've mentioned are a focal issue of being currently homeless, so we want a service goal of permanent housing. The client lives on the street, so they want a shelter would be a service goal. Winter's approaching, so we want to make sure the client has warm shelter. Yeah, that's page 418 in the skills textbook, table 11.1. Reflecting and proposing goals. Reflecting goals, that's when we convey our empathic understanding of the client's views of the goals that the client wishes to pursue. It is a form of active listening. When we reflect the client's goals, we demonstrate that we have heard and understand the direction the client wants to go. Proposing goals, that's when we tentatively propose a goal to the client when the client cannot or will not identify a goal, and we do not want to postpone our engagement. We don't want to postpone or engage in additional person, issue, situation exploration, so sometimes we need to propose a temporary goal. A format that we can use when proposing these goals to our clients would be, I wonder if it would make sense to establish this as one goal for our work together. Clients can choose to accept, reject, or modify that proposed goal. Okay, then we want to develop an action plan. Once we establish goals, next we'll engage them in the process of developing action plans. Action plans are also known as service plans or treatment plans, and they address questions of who, what, when, and how the worker and the client will pursue the agreed upon goals, how we'll work together. Basically, who's going to do what, when, and how it's going to get done. The skills required in this action planning process are lifelong learning, scientific inquiry, and critical thinking. Together, we, as a social worker and the client, determine the roles that we're going to adopt. We're going to be an advocate. We may be a broker. We may be a counselor. We may be an educator. We may be a case manager. The timing and location of the meetings, and when and where and when the change of efforts will occur. The nature of a typical meeting, so that those involved understand the general expectations. So together, we will work together with our client to determine that. We'll also work together to determine the obstacles and potential resources that could affect outcomes that can be thought of as a risk and protective factors for our service plan. We also review and reflect on the likely benefits of a successful conclusion. Okay, we're going to talk about the spiral of change. Most social work action plans involve changes of some kind. It could be a change that we help to resolve an issue and achieve a goal. These changes are often targeted at both the person and the situation. Regardless of the focus of change, if the client is not ready for the plan change or is not motivated for action, they rarely do it. Client systems vary in their readiness and motivation for change. So sometimes someone may walk in there and you can tell that they're absolutely motivated, and some of them you can tell just by talking to them that they are not quite there yet. We're going to talk about spiral where change recognizes that people frequently lapse in their attempts at change. They return to and redo previous stages, and they recycle the process often several times before change becomes habituated. We can find more about that if you want to look on page 422 in the text about Norcross's spiral of change. That's page 422 in the text. It is first full paragraph. Norcross refers to the steps or processes in the spiral change model, which includes step 1, which is psych, which refers to the process of contemplating change or becoming psyched about it. Step 2 is prep, which refers to planning or prepping, and this is done by exploring and selecting ways and means to pursue and achieve the goals. Step 3 is perspire, which means that the self-changer is putting the plan into effect and begins to work at it, to take action. Step 4 is persevere, which means the person has to also be ready and has a plan for dealing with slips, lapses, relapses, or plateaus in the change process. Frequently, perseverance also involves recycling the psyching and prepping steps before resuming action. Step 5 is persist, which involves maintaining the desired change over a sustained period of time. Some changes are so desirable that people wish to maintain them for as long as they live, such as quitting smoking. Now we're identifying action steps. Often the goals of the action plan are too big to accomplish at one time. That is when we engage the client in identifying smaller action steps that, when completed, constitute progress towards goal achievement. In identifying action steps, we and our clients use information gathered and hypotheses. Remember our explanatory and our change-oriented hypotheses that we've generated during the exploration and assessment phases. We foster a creative brainstorming atmosphere and use the skills of questioning, seeking clarification, reflecting, going beyond, and seeking feedback to generate possible tasks. Critical thinking is also needed while we're identifying action steps, because we'll need to think through issues such as, is the action step within a client's capacity? Are there sufficient resources? Are there opportunities for the client to attempt the task? What is the client's motivation and readiness? While we're identifying action steps are also known as instrumental objectives because they are instrumental to achieving the established service goals. When we break action steps into small tasks, they have a relatively high probability of success because the client is allowed to make little small bits of progress. That keeps them motivated. We can read page 424 about depression. Because large goals can seem overwhelming. Suppose you're 50 pounds overweight, and to lose that much to improve your health, you commit to a goal of losing 50 pounds as soon as possible. Except through surgery, it is physically impossible to lose that much weight all at once, so reducing it by 1 pound, then another, and then another, however, is conceivable. So just breaking it down into smaller steps. We can't imagine losing 50 pounds, but we can imagine just losing 1 pound or 2 pounds. So just breaking it down into just little small steps, little small pieces, creates that motivation that we need with our clients. Identifying action steps involves determining what will be done, when, and by whom. These include actions that we or the client will take in our work towards goal achievement. The various action steps may be referred to as client tasks or between session tasks or client homework. We don't really want to take that term homework with our clients because that means that we're assigning them something. That means that we're taking a role that we don't really need to take with our clients. But sometimes it's called that. These action steps that clients take during the intervals between our meetings. These are tasks that they're doing that the client is going to do between our meetings. Worker tasks are the tasks that we complete outside the context of meetings with our clients. In-session tasks are procedures, activities, or intervention techniques that we or clients undertake during our meetings together. Maintenance tasks are the regularly occurring personal or situational activities that become routine or institutionalized by clients to promote long-term change. Lasting change usually requires ongoing attention. The most effective maintenance tasks occur regularly and function as reminders, incentives, or rewards for the effective individuals, families, groups, organizations, communities, or societies. These types of maintenance tasks are determined by the client and the social worker. Together, we determine those. While we're identifying action steps, we and our clients engage each other in generating small steps towards the goal. We can initiate this by asking questions such as, what would represent a first step toward achieving this goal? Or what will be the first time that you are beginning to make progress towards this goal? These types of questions also suggest ways to evaluate progress. While we're identifying action steps, we want to identify maintenance tasks that we and our clients envision a future where positive changes have already occurred and goals have been achieved. Together, we address the question of how do we maintain these changes over the long term? How can these changes become natural and routine part of every day? During the contracting phase, we ask questions and share information that lead to establishment of manageable tasks that, when completed, contribute to the accomplishment of one or more goals. When we both agree on the action steps and we are certain that the client and we both understand, we record that agreed upon steps in our case notes. If the client cannot identify an action step, we can tentatively propose one for consideration. Would be done something like, does blank sound like a first step towards the goal of what? Once action step has been agreed upon, we formalize the agreement by establishing action step, and we can use the format. So the first step that you and I will take is we will complete this task by whatever date and talk about it at our next meeting. Agreement about action steps typically increases clients' motivation to make these changes, especially if the tasks are relevant to the goals and are within each person's resources and capacities and are consistent with explanatory and change-oriented hypotheses. So when the clients agree upon these action steps, when they can tell that we both agree upon these action steps, that does increase their motivation. When we're planning for evaluation, as helping professionals and the social workers, we are responsible for evaluating the progress toward problem resolution and goal achievement. Regardless of where we are practicing, we should be able to identify some means to measure progress. In planning for evaluation, be sure to consider the goodness of fit between the measurement tools or procedures and the client's capabilities and resources. In many practice contexts, failure to evaluate progress may constitute negligence or malpractice. There are several ways that progress towards goal achievement can be measured. One of the more applicable methods is called the goal attainment scaling, the GAS. Each goal is valued on a scale of 1 to 10, and the dimensions for measurement are not predetermined. If there's an example on page 431, and we'll see that you can make it specific for each client, each unique client, system, focal issue, and goal. Page 431, table 11.3. When we're planning for evaluation, there are other means for evaluating progress towards goal achievement, which include frequency counting, which involves us, the client, or another person in the client's environment keeping track of the frequency of a goal-related behavior, how often it occurs. We've got subjective rating, which requires that either we, the clients, or other person make relative judgments concerning the extent, the duration, the frequency, or intensity of a targeted behavior. Example of a rating form is on page 432. Subjective ratings also work well for problems that involve intensity of unpleasant personal feelings or sensations. These are often called subjective units of distress scales. The SUD scale, an example is on page 433 of that, table 11.6. Frequency counts and subjective ratings can be easily converted to graph forms through spreadsheet programs. There are also a variety of available valid and reliable paper and pencil measurement tools, often called the RAIs or Rapid Assessment Instruments. Now we're going to talk about summarizing the contract or the service agreement. This involves a concise review of the essential elements of the service agreements created by the client and us. The contents of a service contract include the focal issues of work, or those goals, those priority issues. The priority issues, and the next is goals. Then it's going to talk the action plans, the tasks or action steps, and the means by which we and the client intend to evaluate progress. Written agreements are preferred so that all the parties involved may have copies and can refer to them as needed. Whether formal or informal, written or unwritten, the service agreements or contracts reflects our commitment to work together with the client toward achievement of agreed upon goals. Service agreements or contracts represents a key component of effective social worker practice. Example of a service contract, the guidelines are on page 436. Okay, that's box 11.3. In action planning table, the APT enables the professional and the client to refer to the focal issues, the service goals, and the action and evaluation plans. And on page 438, we've got an example of that. And that is all I've got for this chapter, which is chapter 11, which is the contracting. Thank you all.